How did a small kingdom on the edge of Asia stop the greatest empire the world had ever seen? How did wooden stakes hidden beneath a muddy river become the weapon that shattered the Mongol dream of conquest? The answer lies on the waters of the Bach Dang River, where courage, cunning, and sacrifice forged a victory for the ages. By the late 13th century, the Mongol Empire stretched from the steppes of Mongolia to the plains of Hungary. It had crushed kingdoms, shattered dynasties, and brought empires to their knees. No army could match their cavalry, no city could withstand their siege machines. They were in every sense the masters of the known world. Yet in the humid jungles and winding rivers of Southeast Asia, the Mongols faced something they had not expected, a people who refused to bow. This was Jai Viet, a small kingdom, proud and resilient, nestled along the Red River Delta. For generations, it had fought to preserve its independence against powerful neighbors. Its leader in 1288 was Tran Hung Dao, a general whose mind was as sharp as his sword, and whose will matched that of the greatest conquerors in history. The Mongols had invaded twice before. In 1258, they stormed Jai Viet, but the Vietnamese withdrew, lured them deeper, and then struck back. In 1285, the Mongols returned with overwhelming force under Prince Togon, son of Kublai Khan himself. Again, Jai Viet resisted, retreating strategically, leaving nothing but scorched earth for the invaders. The Mongols won ground, but they could not hold it. Their horses withered in the humid heat, their supplies dwindled, their soldiers fell to ambushes and disease. And now in 1288, Kublai Khan demanded revenge. He sent his fleet and armies once more, determined to crush Jai Viet once and for all. The Mongols marched with confidence. They carried with them the memory of conquest across Asia and Europe. But Tran Hung Dao had prepared. He knew the terrain. He knew the rivers, the tides, and the traps that could turn strength into weakness. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike any other. On the waters of the Bach Dang River, the fate of a nation in the limits of empire would be decided. Tran Hung Dao knew that he could not defeat the Mongols in open battle. Their numbers were too great, their cavalry too swift, their archers too deadly. But on the rivers, there he held the advantage. The Bach Dang River was no ordinary waterway. Its tides rose and fell with relentless force, swallowing banks and exposing mudflats within hours. For a man of vision, the river itself could be a weapon. And so the general devised a plan worthy of legend. Thousands of sharpened wooden stakes were driven deep into the riverbed, their tips hidden beneath the water at high tide. When the tide receded, they would rise like a forest of spears, impaling any ship caught in their grasp. To the Mongols, the river would seem safe, but beneath the surface, death waited. This was only part of his design. Tran Hung Dao arranged his forces with care. Light warships would harass the Mongol fleet, then retreat, drawing them deeper into the Bach Dang. Ambushes lined the shores, hidden among reeds and trees, ready to strike when the enemy faltered. Every movement, every feigned retreat, every flaming arrow had its place in the grand design. It was not brute strength that would bring victory, but patience, precision, and cunning. While the Mongols believed they pursued a fleeing enemy, they would in truth be marching into a grave of water and fire. The stage was set not just for a battle, but for a masterpiece of strategy, one that would echo through the centuries. The morning of April 9th, 1288, dawned heavy with mist. The Bach Dang River lay still, hiding its deadly secret beneath the surface. On the horizon, sails appeared. Hundreds of Mongol warships, their banners snapping in the wind, their prows cutting through the water like blades. At their head sailed Omar and Phan Thiep, commanders of the UN fleet. They were confident. Before them, they saw Vietnamese ships scattered, small and fragile, retreating upriver as if in fear. To the Mongols, it was the same story they had seen before, a weaker enemy fleeing before overwhelming might. The drums of the Mongols thundered. Horns blared across the waters. Arrows darkened the sky as their ships surged forward. The Vietnamese played their part perfectly. Light warships darted in, loosing volleys of arrows, then broke away, vanishing into the winding channels. The Mongols gave chase, shouting in triumph, their larger vessels plowing deeper into the Bach Dang. The battle roared to life. Arrows whistled, striking shields and sails. Flaming projectiles arced across the river, setting small craft ablaze. The clash of steel rang out as boarding parties fought hand-to-hand, swords clashing, spears thrusting, men grappling and falling into the bloodied water. From the shores, the sounds of war echoed. War drums pounding like thunder, gongs reverberating through the mist. Hidden in the reeds, Vietnamese soldiers waited, watching, knowing the moment was near. The Mongols pressed harder, driving upriver, convinced that their prey was cornered. But beneath their ships, the tide had already begun to turn. The water level dropped slowly, almost imperceptibly, and with it, the stakes hidden in the riverbed began to rise. The trap was closing. The tide began to fall. At first, the Mongols noticed nothing. Their heavy warships pressed upriver, chasing the fleeing Vietnamese. Victory seemed close. They laughed, jeered, certain the enemy was cornered. But then came the grinding sound, the splintering of wood, the sudden lurch of a ship halted in midstream. A cry rose from the deck. Another ship shuddered, its hull pierced from below. And another. The hidden stakes of the Bach Dang had awakened. As the tide receded, thousands of sharpened poles emerged from the depths, invisible no longer. The great Mongol ships, their weight dragging them down, became impaled. Hulls split open, water rushed in, panic spread like fire. The river that had seemed a road to victory had become a graveyard. From the shores, the signal was given. War drums boomed, horns blared, and suddenly the reeds and hills erupted with soldiers. Vietnamese warships surged forward, light and swift, darting between the trapped Mongol vessels. Arrows rained down, fire spread from ship to ship, and the once proud fleet dissolved into chaos. The Mongols fought desperately. Men leapt into the water, only to be dragged under by the current. Officers shouted, trying to rally, but their voices were drowned by screams. Flaming arrows pierced sails, setting them ablaze. Smoke rolled across the river like a shroud. From every side, Jai Viet struck. Spears jabbed from the banks. Boats swarmed from behind, and the tide of battle turned into slaughter. The trap of Bach Dang had sprung, and the empire that had conquered half the world was bleeding in a narrow river, far from its step. The Mongol fleet was in ruins. Ships cracked and sank, one after another, as the river swallowed them whole. Men screamed as they were dragged into the depths, their heavy armor pulling them down. Those who tried to swim were cut down by arrows, their bodies floating amid burning wreckage. From the banks, Vietnamese soldiers poured fire and steel into the chaos. Light boats darted like hawks among trapped prey, ramming, boarding, slaughtering. War cries echoed across the Bach Dang, shaking the hearts of the invaders. The great admiral of the Yuan fleet, Omar, struggled to rally his men, but his voice was lost in the roar of flames and crashing timber. His flagship, caught on the stakes, listed violently as fire swept across its deck. Soon it was engulfed, swallowed by river and fire alike. Omar himself fell, another victim claimed by the trap. Beside him, countless Mongol officers perished. Entire units dissolved in terror. Those who tried to retreat found their way blocked. Those who pressed forward met nothing but sharpened stakes and blazing ships. The river ran red with blood. Charred beams and shattered shields drifted downstream, carrying with them the corpses of men who had once believed themselves invincible. For the Yuan invaders, this was no longer a battle, it was annihilation. And for the Vietnamese, it was more than victory. It was vengeance. For burned villages, for stolen harvests, for years of invasion. Every thrust of the spear, every arrow loosed, carried the weight of a nation's fury. The invincible empire of the Mongols, broken on a riverbank. The rout had become a slaughter. The smoke of battle drifted away. but the name Bach Dang would never fade. On that river, in the spring of 1288, an army of farmers, fishermen, and citizen soldiers shattered the pride of the Mongol Empire. Kublai Khan, master of China and grandson of Genghis Khan, had sent wave after wave of armies to crush Dai Viet. Each time they had been met with resistance, but on Bach Dang, his dream of conquest met its grave. Tran Hung Dao's trap had destroyed the invincible fleet. Hundreds of ships were sunk or burned. Tens of thousands of soldiers were killed or captured. The Yuan dynasty, which had conquered half the world, had been stopped cold by a small nation that refused to kneel. For Vietnam, it was more than survival. It was proof. Proof that courage, unity, and brilliant strategy could triumph over brute strength. It was a declaration that freedom was worth any price, that a people fighting for their homeland could defeat the mightiest empire on earth. The victory echoed through generations. It became a symbol of national spirit, of resilience, of defiance against tyranny. Songs, poems, and legends carried the memory of the stakes hidden in the river, of the flames on the waves, of the cries of men who fought not for conquest, but for their land and their families. And so, the Bach Dang stands eternal. A river of blood, a river of fire, a river of freedom. It reminds the world that no empire is invincible. And it reminds Vietnam that the strength of a united people can change the course of history. The Mongols came as conquerors, they left as broken invaders, and Dai Viet endured, stronger, freer, unbowed.